We're talking today with Hoyt Christensen of Ionia, Michigan, and the interviewer is James Smither of the Grand Valley State University Veterans History Project. Okay, now can you start with some background on yourself and to begin with where and when were you born?
I'm born May 14th, 1926, just south of Greenville, Michigan, in Montcalm County.
All right. And were your family farmers or did they do something else?
My dad was a farmer. My mother worked in the silk mills and building.
Okay. And now, did they continue doing that through the 30s or did they have economic problems?
My dad farmed all his life. My mother quit working when she had her first baby, which is a daughter who's 3 years older than I am.
Okay. So by the time you came along, she was just a housewife at that point, a farm wife. Okay. But your father was able to keep his farm?
Yes.
Okay. And what was he growing on the farm?
Oh, corn, wheat, and hay for the cattle, and oats, I think, too.
Okay. And how much schooling did you have?
I finished the 7th grade,
And what did you do after that?
went to work, found a job. I had my books all bought for the next year in school, and I needed 10 cents more to buy them, and I asked my dad for 10 cents. He said, "If you need a dime, go get a job." So I took my books back that I had already bought and went and got a job.
And what kind of job did you get?
On a farm, $2.50 a week, my room and board, and every other Sunday off.
All right. And did you stay with that until you went in the service, or did you change jobs?
No, I went from that job to running a small dairy just north of town out here, Dunsmore's Dairy. I run the whole thing, the bottling works, and washed this equipment, and done the pasteurizing, and bottled the milk, and put it in the refrigerator, ready for the drivers the next morning.
Okay. And how old were you when you started that?
I think I was 15.
Okay. Now, do you remember hearing about Pearl Harbor?
Oh, you bet I do.
How did you learn about that?
We happened to have the radio on that night, or the next day on Sunday. I think it was Sunday when they announced it on the radio.
All right.
Which was one of the few days we were allowed to have the radio on.
Okay. Now, how did that affect life in the community or stuff around you?
I don't think very much immediately, no.
Now, did you know people who went off to war right away?
Oh,
Or?
yes, yeah. I had quite a few neighbors that went off to war right away.
Okay. Now, before Pearl Harbor, were you paying any attention to the news in the world and the war in Europe?
Not very much, no.
Okay. And then when it did start, did you think it would be over before you were old enough to get in it?
Yes.
All right. Now, when did you start thinking that maybe you were going to have to go?
About the time I had run down to register to drive board.
Okay. And when did you do that?
Well, very close to my birthday, right honored her within a few days of it.
Okay,
I don't
so-
remember exactly.
Okay, so like 1944 then.
Yeah.
All right. And when did you get your draft notice?
I couldn't honestly tell you. I think I went to Detroit for my first physical in August.
Mhm.
I'm not sure exactly, but I think, yeah, I know it was in the summertime.
Okay. So pretty quickly, and then you actually started training when?
In November of 44,
Okay. And where did they send you for basic training?
Camp Robinson, Arkansas.
Okay. And how did you get down there?
Went on a troop train.
Okay. And what do you remember about that train trip?
We were spent most of our time sitting on sidings. Very slow.
Now, did they have food on the train, or did you have to stop?
They stopped, and usually Blue Star Mothers had something for us to eat.
Okay. And then where in Arkansas was the camp?
It was right near, what is the big city in?
Little Rock is
Little
the...
Rock, yeah.
Okay.
There's another small town near there, I think is really the address for the base,
Mm-hmm.
close to Little Rock.
All right. And what was basic training like?
It was tough, I'll tell you. We only had 6 weeks of it. And it was a lot easier for me than it was the city boys, I'll tell you. They'd never done anything physical.
Mm-hmm.
The thing that I didn't really understand about Camp Robinson in Arkansas, that every place we went uphill. I never figured out how we got back to the starting beginning.
All right. Now, did they put a lot of emphasis on discipline and following orders?
Yeah, that was discipline, close order drill. That was the main thing. We had some firearms training, but not much. Most of it was what they call PT and
Mm-hmm.
close order drill. That's to get people to do exactly as they're told when they're told.
Okay. Now, was that easy for you to do, or were you used to?
Yeah, it was easy for me.
Okay. Of course, you've been kind of your own boss almost for
Yeah.
a while.
We had a guy 42 years old, had 2 kids, was married. He couldn't do much of that PT, and that just amazed me to think that guy couldn't do that.
Mm-hmm.
I see why now.
Yeah. 42. Had he volunteered or was he drafted?
He was drafted.
Wow.
He was from Wisconsin.
Okay. Because I guess at that point they were afraid they were going to run out of infantrymen.
They were. We had one guy that had 6 kids, and he was 44, I think.
Now, and did those guys just go into regular line units, or did they get other jobs?
You know, I don't remember of a person that I took my training with being anywhere near where I was after I went overseas.
Okay. So they may have found other jobs for them.
Yeah.
All right. And let's see. Had you gone hunting when you were younger?
Some, not much.
Okay. Did you do well with the marksmanship, or?
No, I was terrible at that. In fact, I fired at everything except the target when we fired for score because I didn't want to stay in the infantry.
Oh.
And I don't know whether somebody else shot my target or what, but they made me a expert marksman, left me in the infantry.
Oh well. All right. So after those 6 weeks, what do they do with you?
Sent us to Fort Ord, California, and we were there, I don't think a week. We might have been there a week. We wasn't there very long. And then they put us on the General E.T. columns. We left on Friday, April 13th.
Okay, so that's 1945 now. And what was the sea voyage like?
37 days on there. Went in a convoy. They picked up other ships along the way. We went all over.
Now, was this a Liberty ship you were on, or something like that?
I don't know, what is a Liberty ship?
That was one of these mass-produced
I think I got
ships
a
that
picture of that.
they made during the war.
There's one of the overseas, huh?
Yeah, that could be.
That's what I came home on.
That's the kind of design. And they use names like that. All right. Now, when you were on the ship, was the weather good, or did you get storms?
No, I don't think we had a storm at all.
Okay.
Days out there, you swear you're sitting right on a plate of glass. Once in a while you see a flying fish jump up, skim along. Most of the time it was almost nothing.
Mm-hmm. Did people get seasick?
A lot of them did. I didn't want anything to eat for 2 or 3 days, but I never got sick. You know, I was lucky there.
And then once you're on the smoother water, probably people got used to it.
Yeah.
Okay. 37 days. Did you stop anywhere?
No.
Okay. So where did you land?
I think we landed at Baffin Bay, New Guinea.
All right. And do you remember anything about that place?
Not too much. We was what they call the duck replacement
Mm-hmm.
camp, and we got sent into the 31st Division, which was right there in close proximity, and just staging, and it wasn't very long, and they took off. Went
And where did you go next?
either Halmahera or Morotai. I don't remember
Okay.
which one was first.
All right.
They're
Oh.
both quite close.
Okay. And now, was there fighting in those places?
Yes.
All right. And what were you doing when they landed in these places? What do you remember about?
I was scared to death.
Okay.
Yeah. Just kind of following the older guys. The old guys kind of took you under their wing. Some of them did, you know.
Okay. So you had some. So the men you joined, some of them had been in action already.
Oh yeah, they
So-
had some of them that had a lot of action. Guy that I kind of hooked up with, he told me, he said, if you survive 30 days, you got a good chance of making it. He said the first 30 days is the worst.
All right. Now, what were the physical conditions like on those islands?
Not good. 'Cause you didn't have anything, you know, no water, no electricity, nothing. The water you got in the river, you waded through it, and you washed yourself in it, you drank out of it. If you wanted to cook something, you took water, you got water and cooked your food in it.
Now, did you have pills or something to clean the water with,
We
or?
were supposed to have, but most of the time we didn't have it. We didn't even have the ones for the malaria.
Okay. And on Morotai or Halmahera, I mean, was that a risk of getting malaria?
I had malaria.
Okay.
I didn't get it till we were on Mindanao when I got it.
All right. Now,
In fact, I think I had malaria and what's the other one? Dengue fever all at the same time one time. I
okay.
feel just like you've been run over with a tank.
Yeah. Now, but that's all later after you're in the Philippines. So
Yeah.
in these first islands, that's not happening. Now, was there a lot of resistance on Morotai or Halmahera, or was that pretty quick?
Not too bad, no. When we left, whichever one was the last one, and went towards Davao, 3 days out at sea, we had to turn around and go back because the outfits that relieved us, they run them off into the ocean. We had to go back and take it back.
Well, I think they had officially taken Morotai earlier than that, but there were still Japanese there.
Oh yeah, you never got them all.
Mhm.
Never got them all.
All right.
I think the worst combat I was in was mostly after the war was declared over. I was going back, digging these guys out of these caves in the mountains and trying to convince them that the war was over.
Mm-hmm. Okay. And so you're on Morotai, you're on Halmahera, and then they load you up and they take you and they land you at Davao. So and that's on the island of Mindanao.
Yes.
Okay. And that was already secured by the Americans when you landed?
No.
Okay, so you had to attack there.
Yeah.
Okay. Now, did you actually make a landing invasion?
Yeah.
Okay. So can you describe what you remember about that?
Not too much, no.
Were you in landing craft?
Yes.
The kind with the door that comes down in the front and...
LST, I think they call it.
Well, the LST is the big one with the big, like they have in Muskegon, with the big doors that open on the bow.
For the tank. And this one had one
A ramp,
that
yeah.
ramp that flopped down.
Yeah, so the LCVP or something like that, the
I know.
Higgins boat.
Yeah.
Well, was it a little one that held a couple dozen men, or was it
Oh,
bigger?
it was more than that.
Okay.
More than that. And it had some trucks on there.
Well, it might have been an LCM or an LCT. It was a bigger one.
Yeah,
Okay.
I don't know
Okay. And then did the Japanese resist when you landed, or were they in the interior?
what it was. They were more in the interior there. There wasn't much resistance at the beach when we
Okay.
went down
And then do you keep going forward until you run into them, or what happens?
there. Yeah, we went up to what's called the Greenville River Valley. Went full length of the island, went clear to Cagayan on the north end.
Okay. And that's what kind of terrain was that?
A lot of it was mountainous, a lot of it was just swamps, miles of it, you know, grass higher than your head, what's called kunai grass.
Mm-hmm.
But then there was some mountainous areas that were pretty mountainous, pretty mountainous. It's one of the things that amazed me over there. I don't ever remember seeing a snake in the South Pacific, never. They must have been there, but I've often thought about it since maybe the all the activity. Maybe they weren't in the area where we were with noise. Maybe made them move on or something, I don't know.
Mm-hmm.
I thought we would see a lot of snakes and that sort of thing, but I never seen one.
Yeah. We had a lot of them in New Guinea, but you didn't stay there very long.
No,
Right.
it wasn't there very long.
Now, did you see much of the native population in the Philippines?
Yes, seen quite a lot of them, especially up in the mountains where a lot of the people had moved to the mountains and were up there.
Now, what kind of way of life did they seem to have?
Oh, they just lived in shacks made out of bamboo and palm leaves for roofs. Lived off the land, basically.
Mm-hmm. And
What they could steal, they were great thieves.
mm. Now, did you get any Filipinos attached to your unit still?
Yeah, we had guides and what we call poop boys to carry stuff for us, ammunition and things like that. Carry guys back that got killed or injured or whatever.
Mm-hmm. And now, how did you see? At what point did you get sick with the malaria? How far into that were you? Do you think?
We were already. Yes, we were on. We were stationed on the Del Monte pineapple plantation. We set up a camp there after we had taken Mindanao. So while we was at that pineapple plantation that I got the malaria in the dinghy.
Okay. And so, I mean, so you said that it's like being hit by a truck or something. Did you have a high fever with that?
Yeah, the malaria, you run a real high fever, and the dengue fever, your joints, you just move a finger and it hurts bad. You know, it's an infection of the joints or what it is.
And did they have any way of treating that?
I don't remember that they gave us Adabrin for malaria. It was supposed to slow it down a little bit,
Mm-hmm.
but it didn't cure anything.
Right. Well, I think Adabrin was the one that was supposed to keep you from getting it, and then
Yeah,
quinine was supposed to help.
Yeah,
Did they give you quinine?
I never had any quinine in my nose.
Okay. All right. And so basically you just had to lie there and wait for it to go away?
Yeah. Take the cot, move it outside when I had the chills, and move it inside when it was cold. It didn't work with either one.
Right. And how long were you out with that, do you think?
I think it lasted about 2 weeks from the time I had it to worse.
Okay. Now, do you remember anything in particular about any actual combat on Mindanao? And did you see anything of the Japanese?
Oh, you bet.
Okay. And can you tell anything about what you saw or what you did?
We took to the island.
Now, were they in fortifications or just hiding?
Some were, yeah, some were down in the swamps, and they seemed to like that. Get down in there, they could hide good. Either that or be where the palm trees were and get up and hang up in the trees, put snipers up there.
Okay. And would they try to attack your positions at night or infiltrate?
We've had a few, what they call bonsai attacks, where they tried to overrun us at night.
Okay. Explain to an audience what happens if they're launching a bonsai attack. What are they doing?
They got bayonets on their guns and they try to kill anybody they can see or think there's somebody there.
All right. Did they ever take you by surprise doing that, or?
I think one time they took us by surprise, yeah. I think that was the time the guy rolled a concussion grenade in their foxhole. And they put the helmet on it and set on the helmet. I had a sore ass for a few days. I'll tell you.
It's a good thing it wasn't that big a grenade.
Yeah.
But the helmet could actually contain
Yeah.
the blast from that?
A concussion grenade, it wasn't a fragment grenade.
Right.
No, that tear it all apart.
And then what did you do? I mean, after you sat on the grenade, what did you do?
Tried to get the dirt out of my eyes and out of my clothes so I could see what I was doing.
Do you have somebody else in the foxhole with you? Or?
Yeah, there were two of us in the hole.
Okay. Now, did the Japanese go around and past you, or did they not get that far?
I really don't know how far it came from, but it rolled into the hole. I happened to see it as it was coming in.
Mm-hmm.
Put the helmet over and sat on it.
And then how long did the attack last, do you think?
Probably a half hour, but it seemed like a lot longer than that.
Okay. And then at the end of it, were they all dead, or did they leave? Or?
There were some dead, and some left.
Now, did you ever take any Japanese prisoners before the end of the war?
One.
Okay. And how did that happen?
Actually, it was after the war.
Okay.
Actually, it was after the war. It's the only one we ever took.
Okay. And so that was on Leyte? Or-
It was on Mindanao.
That's still in Mindanao. So you're on Mindanao when the war ends.
Yeah.
Okay. So then, okay, explain. How did you wind up taking a prisoner?
We went back up in the mountains to try and get them out of these holes, caves they were in, and convince them that the war was over. We took one.
So one guy believed you and came out?
Yeah.
Okay. Now, did you have someone along who spoke Japanese?
Oh yeah.
And were these Japanese Americans or?
No, they were Filipinos.
Okay. And when they knew where to look?
Yeah, they knew how to talk to them.
Okay. Now, were there other situations where they just wouldn't come out?
Oh yeah. Sometimes they'd use flamethrower to get them out, and usually they didn't make it all the way out.
Mm-hmm. And do you have a sense of how many of those sorts of encounters you had? Right. And once the war was over, would any of the Japanese still try to sneak into your camps, either to steal stuff or make trouble?
Not that I'm aware of.
Okay.
They may have, but I don't know.
Okay. Now, as we get into the later stages of the war, some of the men start to go home on points and that kind of thing. But you're a new guy, so you're not going anywhere. So when you're on Mindanao, does the 31st Division go home?
Yes.
Okay. And what happened to you at that point?
I transferred to an ordinance outfit that was down on the beach.
Okay. And what did you do with them?
Made me shop foreman in the automotive section. Over the top of a guy that had been trained
Mm-hmm.
to be a mechanic. He wasn't very happy about that.
Did you outrank him at that point?
Yeah.
Okay. Were you a sergeant then, or
Yeah.
corporal? Okay.
Sergeant.
All right. Now, did you know anything about fixing vehicles, or?
Oh yeah. I had worked for a trucking company before I went in the service.
Mm-hmm.
We did our own mechanic work there.
All right. And did you have Filipinos working in the shop, or just Americans?
Just Americans.
Okay. Now, you mentioned that the Filipinos were good at stealing things. What kinds of things did they like to take?
Anything they could carry. I never seen such a bunch of thieves in my life.
Now, was that a problem trying to run the shop? Would they take things from there?
No, they didn't take things from there. No.
So where would they take them from?
Well, we had a salvage yard. I'll tell you, they had an awful time keeping out of that, 'cause the military had sold them Jeeps and 6x6s and stuff, that they weren't much good anymore, but they wouldn't sell them parts. So they'd steal out of our salvage yard if they could. But you leave anything laying down, Filipino around, he'd have it. No matter if it was any good to anybody or not. They don't like the work, really.
All right. Now, while you're there on Mindanao, and once the war's over, what did Did the Army give you any kind of entertainment or anything like that? What did anybody do when they were off duty?
We had, when it was in that engineer outfit, we had movies quite often, and we did when it was in the ordinance outfit, we had movies.
Okay. Did the USO ever come through, or were you too far away?
I don't ever remember the USO coming through.
Mm-hmm.
The only people I can ever remember doing anything for me was the Blue Star Mothers. I've never seen anybody else.
All right, so you said about the only people who came through to do anything for you were, as I asked, it wasn't USO.
I don't know where the movies came
Yeah.
from. I think that was all military.
Yeah, the military did that, but
The only dealings I had with the Red Cross was we run into them one time and I wanted to get a deck of cards home and they wanted to charge me $1 for them.
Oh.
They could jam them up their ass and pay me $1 for a deck of cards.
okay. So I mean, so guys would play cards. Did they do sports? Did they play baseball or things like that?
Yeah.
All right. Now, did they have like beer available, things like that, or?
Oh yes, they had beer available.
And were there any sort of morale or discipline problems? Did guys get into trouble?
Not during the wartime itself. After the wartime, they got in trouble. Had to go to town at night, get drunk, get in trouble. But
Mm-hmm.
during the wartime, you didn't have time to get in trouble.
Okay. Tell me a little bit about going back to being in the 31st in K Company. What were the men in your company like?
We had a variety of people from all walks of life, from all age groups, basically from 18 years old up to 50 years old, all types of education, just general run of people.
Mm-hmm. You told me something about what was the origin of the 31st Division. Where did they come from to start with?
Georgia, Florida, Alabama National Guards.
All right. And so were a lot of those just country boys with
Yeah.
not a lot of education or things like that?
And they were good soldiers.
Mm-hmm.
Good soldiers.
All right. Okay. So, and then toward the end there, I guess getting into 46 sometime, and you eventually go on to the island of Leyte, is that right?
Yes. Yeah, I went to Leyte.
And
After I went out of the ordnance outfit,
Mhm.
which was on Mindanao,
Mhm.
I went to this engineer's outfit on Leyte.
Okay.
Tacloban,
And what were the engineers doing at Tacloban?
building roads and airports and things like that.
Okay.
Doing things for the civilians.
Okay. And what was your job with them?
I run a fuel truck. I had a Filipino that run the pump, and I drove the truck. We delivered fuel to all this equipment around in these pits and stuff where they were building things.
All right. Now, was that area, I mean, any different from Mindanao?
Well, it was different in that we were practically on the beach, where in Mindanao, after the war was over, we was up on top of a mountain. That's where this Del Monte pineapple plantation
Mhm.
was. And we were set up in there.
Okay. Now, was there a lot more activity on Leyte and a lot more Americans?
Oh, yeah, yeah, and of course the town of Tacloban was right there close by. And it had been pretty well rebuilt by that time.
And I don't know, did guys get in trouble with women and things like that, or just
Oh,
get drunk? Yeah.
Oh,
As a sergeant, I mean, did you have other people answering to you at that point, or were you just on your own?
yeah. In the engineer outfit, I wasn't in charge of anybody, just
Okay.
a truck and
Mhm.
guy that I worked for.
All right. And do you have a sense of how long you stayed with the engineer unit?
Probably 2 months, maybe.
Okay. Now, by the time so when did you leave the Philippines?
17th day of October, 1946.
All right. Now, by that time, were most of the Americans gone, or were there still a lot out there?
No, they was pretty well gone, except that where there had been permanent bases before, and the ones they had to rebuild, of course, there was troops there. There weren't any of these out floating around on the islands looking for trouble.
Okay. Now, were there still Japanese on Leyte when you were there?
Yeah. Oh, yes.
Okay. And how did you know about them, or what were they doing?
Well, you hear the stories, people, they come in and give themselves up, and some of them didn't give themselves up. In fact, we had a prisoner of war camp, that was at Leyte when I was in the engineer outfit, and they had their own people guarding the camp, they run their own camp.
So the Japanese were guarding themselves?
Yeah, they had the people overseeing it run the camp, yeah.
Okay.
Japs were just as honest as the day was long. We had them for poo boys. They used to come in their tent and clean every day and make everything right, And you could leave a carton of cigarettes and lay right on your bed. It would be there when you came back. You never had to worry about it.
So did that experience, did that change your view of the Japanese at all?
Oh, yeah, they were real nice people. Once they were convinced the war was over, they were a whole different people.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Now, were they in the process of sending them back to Japan? Because this is getting late in 1946, the war has been over for a year.
They must have sent some back. I don't know. I couldn't tell you that. I didn't have anything to do with it.
Okay. All right. Now, are there other things that kind of stand out in your memory about being in the Philippines, particular experiences or people or impressions?
My impression of the Filipinos wasn't very good, I'll tell you that. Couldn't trust them. Yeah.
But just in terms of your own experiences or things that happened to you, if you think back to that time, what do you think about?
Well, they'd sneak into our kitchens at night, steal our food, and go to the, whatever they call it, where they keep the clothes and stuff that they issue out. And if they could get in there, they'd steal it. They're an awful bunch of thieves, I'll tell you that. I never had any respect for the Filipinos since then.
Okay. Now, while you were with K Company and you were in action, what kind of losses did your unit take?
At Coogan's Woods, Coogan's Woods, they call it, Coogan's something.
Mm-hmm.
We lost a whole bunch there, about 40%, I think.
Okay. And how did that happen?
That was one of those kamikaze attacks, they overrun us.
Okay. Now, was that the same fight when the concussion grenade wound up in your hole?
Yeah.
Okay. So you had kind of one nasty fight like that.
Yeah.
Now, were the other actions mostly smaller?
Yes.
Okay, and was it usually you trying to find them, or were they kind of showing up and bothering you?
Well, I don't really know what their intentions were, but we'd run into them every once in a while.
Now, did you have, when you saw, the prisoners or people you killed or things like that, were they mostly very young, or did they range in age kind of like your guys did?
Well, towards the end of the war, and of course it was getting towards the end when they got into combat, they were getting to be either young or quite old. One extreme to the other.
Okay. So you have the sense they're running out of people.
Right.
Okay. All right. And then how do you find out that you're going to get to go home?
Well, it was funny, they called me, sent somebody to see me anyway. One day and told me to pack my bags and go out to the airport, and there'd be a plane there to pick me up, to take me up to Manila to catch larger plane home.
Mm-hmm.
So I went up there, sat there 3 days, and no plane showed up. So I went back to camp. 2 days later, they told me there was a LST, I think it was, some small ship,
Mm-hmm.
like going up to Manila. If I wanted to take a ride on that, I could go up there on that instead of waiting for the plane that might not ever come.
Mm-hmm.
So I went up there on that, and then I got up there into the Repel Depot. They gave me a choice of flying out. I forget what day it was. It was a few days away, or going home on a ship. And while I'd sat and waited for a plane for 3 days, it didn't show up, so I took going on the ship, and I shouldn't have done that. We were 17 days going home on the boat. By the time I got to camp down there in Chicago, what's that?
Let's see what they got. Fort Sheridan.
Fort Sheridan. The guys that went by plane and got home and got here and went home on pass and come back and was getting their discharge when I got there.
Mm-hmm. All right. Now, what was the sea voyage like on the way back?
Third day out, we got caught in a typhoon.
Okay. What was that like?
It was almost like being in a submarine. Yeah, that was tough. Peel the paint right off the beams every time that thing would drop into one of them swells at the bottom.
Okay. Now, did they keep you down below decks during that?
Yeah, they locked us down below.
Now, were you worried that you were going to sink or something?
You weren't, you wasn't ever going to get home, I'll tell you that.
All right. How long did the typhoon last?
About 3 days, if I remember right. It was bad.
Did you just kind of get used to it after a while, or?
No, he didn't get used to it. He was hanging on most of the time.
Wow. All right. Now, did you land in San Francisco again or somewhere else?
No, it wasn't San Francisco. I think it tells on that one picture of that boat being home.
San Francisco.
Yeah,
Okay. So once you land back in the States, it's another long train ride back to Chicago? Or did you stay in San Francisco for a while, or?
No, I think we stayed there overnight, so. And, yeah, it wasn't too long going to Chicago.
Mhm.
Of course, we didn't have all those trains that we had to pull over for then,
Mhm.
you know, they wasn't shipping all that war material. Yeah, I think 2 days, so I don't really remember.
Okay. And then did they discharge you at Fort Sheridan?
Yeah, I got a 10-day leave. They sent me home. I was home 10 days and went back to Chicago and got discharged.
All right. And then now, once you're finally out of the Army, what do you do?
I went back to driving a truck,
Okay.
but I couldn't handle it because every time I'd go out and run a long run like Texas or Florida, I'd get tired and I'd get malaria back and I'd be off from work for a week and I couldn't handle that. So then I put in an application and went up to the state hospital for criminal insane up there. I worked there, 37 years, and then I went to, 28 years, and then I went to work for corrections for 10.
Okay. And then what kind of work did you do for those facilities?
I was charging ward most of the time that I was in the
Mhm.
Department of Mental Health. And I was in charge of a block or a whole building most of the time I was in corrections.
Mhm.
In fact, most of the time I run the whole, it's called the whole
Okay.
correction and detention.
So you wound up in some positions of responsibility.
Yeah.
How did you get those? Just walk in?
Just by doing good work.
Okay.
Yes.
So did you work your way up?
Oh, yeah.
Okay.
Got my first promotion when I'd been there 3 years. They put me in charge of ward in the afternoon. And 2 years later, I got in charge of 10 building, which was all outside workers.
Mhm.
243 of them, I think. I got it all by myself.
All right. Now, to look back at the time that you spent in the service, how do you think that affected you? Did you learn anything from it or change at all?
I know I had trouble with alcohol when I first got out of service for a while. I finally decided that I didn't want to go that route anymore. And started working 2 jobs after.
I guess if you had to do it over again, would you have gone?
Would I have gone?
If they gave you a choice, yeah.
If they gave me a choice, I don't know. I'd have to think about that
Mhm.
a while. I probably would have gone. Probably, my father was World War I. I'm World War II. My next brother was in Korea. And my other brother was in Vietnam.
Mm-hmm.
We all done our time.
Right. Do you think that you learned anything out of the experience or got anything that helped you later on?
Oh, I'm sure I did. I'm sure I did.
All right. Again, so again, just sort of again thinking back to that time in the service again, are there other particular things that kind of stand out in your memory that you haven't brought into the story yet?
Yeah, and I probably won't.
Okay, that's your choice. All right, so in that case then, I'd just like to thank you for taking the time to talk to me
Yeah,
today.
okay. Thank you.
Yep.